What is going on, y'all? My name is Gravely, and in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the top 5 exotic primaries that need a buff and how we can actually buff these exotics and make them more usable. Now, before we actually get into these 5 exotics, I want to give a quick honorable mention to the Malfeasance. Now, the main reason that the Malfeasance is not going into the top 5 is primarily due to the fact that Bungie has already announced that hand cannons and scout rifles will be receiving a damage buff in PvE. And because of the nature of how the Malfeasance actually works with the Explosive Shadow perk, it may see a lot more benefit from a hand cannon damage buff than any other hand cannon. But with that being said, let's get into the top 5 exotic primaries that need a buff. Coming in at the number 5 spot, we have the Skyburner's Oath. Now, the Skyburner's Oath has been notorious for being one of the worst exotics in the entire game for a better part of 3 years now, and there is some pretty good reason for that. The only good thing that I can safely say about the Skyburner's Oath is that since it does deal solar explosive damage, yes, it can create Warmind cells. But once you look past that, there really just isn't much helping this gun. I mean, sure, you can shoot through Cabal shields, but even then, an anti-barrier mod can do that same thing. And is it really that hard to just shoot the middle of the shield and stun the Cabal? I really just don't think that's very hard at all. So I just don't think this thing is that good. Even for what it's supposed to do, it just doesn't have very much usefulness. If you guys remember last season, the only real use for the Skyburner's Oath was the Proving Grounds GM Nightfall cheese, which got patched like 2 days after. So Skyburners has been literally useless ever since then, and it's time for a change. So in my opinion, the change that needs to happen to the Skyburner's Oath revolves around the Catalyst. Now, the Catalyst for the Skyburner's Oath increases the range. Now, if you're waiting for me to say what else it does, you're going to be waiting here for a while because it does nothing else. It just increases the range, which has to be one of, if not the most useless catalyst in the entire game, because one, Skyburner is a scout rifle, so it really just doesn't need any more range, and two, it has explosive rounds, which also means it really doesn't need any more range. So you have two things that don't need more range, yet a catalyst that boosts the range. So in my opinion, the best way to change the Skyburner's Oath Catalyst is to take away the range buff or leave it. It really doesn't matter to me because it really doesn't affect the gun very much at all, and give the gun the Full Court perk. Now don't worry, I'm well aware that Full Court is a perk that we pretty much only see on grenade launchers, but here's why it works for the Skyburner's Oath. So the intrinsic trait of the Skyburner's Oath reads Slug Rifle. This weapon lobs large explosive-seeking slugs when you're firing from the hip. When you're aiming down sights, the slugs travel fast and straight with higher damage and a lower rate of fire. And the Full Court perk description reads, increases detonation damage as the projectile travels further before exploding. Now, if you were able to piece that together, you would know that the Full Court perk is the perfect pairing with the Skyburner's Oath. This would make it a much better choice for an exotic primary, and Bungie has already said they want there to be more reason to use exotic primaries over only running exotic heavies and specials. Full Court could literally make Skyburner's Oath a great option in GM Nightfalls where it has no place at the current moment. But overall, I really do feel like the Skyburner's Oath is a very cool weapon, and I feel like this is a pretty good solution to the gun's low usage rate. If you have a different solution, let me know in the comments below, but let's move on to the number 4 spot. Coming in at the number 4 spot, we have the Vex Mythoclast. Now, the Vex Mythoclast came out about a month ago when Vault of Glass dropped, and it's been kind of disappointing ever since. In PvP, the Vex Mythoclast is essentially a 360 RPM auto rifle with the range of a last word. Vex will reach around 23 meters before it actually hits damage drop off, but just to compare that to another 360 RPM auto, a well-rolled False Promises can reach up to 40 meters before actually running into damage fall off, so the Vex Mythoclast is essentially a 360 auto with piss poor range. To make matters worse though, Vex Mythoclast really isn't that good inside of PvE either. It does have the advantage of doing slightly more damage per shot than a regular 360 RPM auto, however, that really just doesn't mean much inside of PvE. And on top of that, the linear fusion mode on the Vex Mythoclast, while it isn't really bad, the linear fusion mode in my opinion is actually really great. The problem with it is that you actually lose your stacks of overcharge every time you stow the Vex Mythoclast, which makes it pretty much impossible to actually use overcharge effectively. At least with other exotics that lose their perk when you swap off of them, those exotics are actually very useful and very good at what they do. Teraba is a great example of this, as you do lose the progress, which I really hate by the way, but it is an absolute ad clear machine and you don't really need to swap off of it. The Vex Mythoclast, a lot of the time you're going to want to switch to a special, and you just can't if you want to use the linear fusion mode. So in my opinion, what needs to happen to the Vex Mythoclast is, for one, you should not lose your stacks of overcharge when you stow the weapon. You should be able to build those up and save them for when you need them. And on top of that, inside of PvP, this thing needs either a damage buff or a range buff. I'm fine with either, but if you're going to leave the range at 23 meters, have this thing be able to kill in something like 4 crits, 2 bodies, have it be a little bit more forgiving than a regular 360 auto. Personally, I would also like to see some changes to the overcharge mode inside of both PvE and PvP. In PvE, I feel like it should just charge up a little bit faster so we can use it more often. And in PvP, I actually feel like it should charge up a little bit slower, since now that you can hold on to them and it is pretty much guaranteeing a one-tap kill with a primary weapon, I think it should require 3 kills to fully charge the overcharge mode. And maybe if you guys really want to get crazy with it, what Bungie could do is make it so you can activate the overcharge early. I don't see them doing that, but those are pretty much the changes I want to see to the Vex Mythoclast. But yeah, let's move on to the number 3 spot. Coming in at the number 3 spot, we have the Cryosthesia 77k. Now the Cryosthesia may actually be the worst exotic that we have in all of Destiny 2. Yes, I do think it is slightly worse than Skyburners. The main problem with this exotic is that it really just is not very good in either PvE or PvP. In PvP, it is a 260 RPM sidearm, which does happen to be one of the worst sidearm archetypes, and on top of that, its exotic perk really isn't helping it out, because yes, you can freeze somebody after getting a kill, but that freeze lasts for the same duration as a regular freeze from any other stasis ability. And honestly, in terms of exotic sidearms, the Rat King and the Traveler's Chosen are a lot better in PvP than the Cryosthesia is, and they fit into that 300 RPM archetype, which is the best sidearm archetype in the game. And once again, don't even think about using the Cryosthesia in PvE, because you will get absolutely laughed at. This thing is an absolute joke. Freezing one target at a time is just not very good at all. Now, what I believe needs to be changed about the Cryosthesia 77k to make it a much better option in both PvE and PvP, well, first of all, in PvP, that freeze needs to last a little bit longer. I'm not saying make it like pre-nerf stasis, but it needs to last long enough for you to actually clean up the kill. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to hear stasis getting buffed, but keep in mind, you do need a kill to actually activate that freeze ability on the Cryosthesia 77k. And in PvE, what I would really like to see happen with the Cryosthesia is when you freeze a target, the other targets around it should also be frozen. Give this thing some more utility than just, I get a kill, I freeze something, and after I repeat that cycle about 5 times, I am now completely out of ammo because this thing chews through ammo insanely fast. Now that is pretty much all I have to say about the Cryosthesia. Now don't worry, I'm well aware some exotics are not supposed to be the best in the game. Some exotics are just supposed to be there for more of a novelty purpose, but the Cryosthesia has gotten to a point where this thing literally is unusable. I don't think I've ever been killed by this thing in PvP, and I've never seen somebody seriously use it inside of PvE. But with that being said, let's move on to the number 2 spot. Coming in at the number 2 spot, we have the Jade Rabbit. Now the problem with the Jade Rabbit doesn't really lie with the weapon itself, because I really do believe it is one of the only usable scouts inside of PvP. When I was using it in this gameplay, I think I dropped about 30 kills with a 6.2 KD. This thing is actually really good. It's easy to get 3 taps, but there is one huge problem with this weapon, and that is its intrinsic trait, the Fate of All Fools. Now the Fate of All Fools reads, chain body shots to gain bonus damage on your next precision shot and return ammo to the magazine. Now that might seem like a pretty good bonus for a weapon, but once you actually see the numbers, you're gonna think otherwise. So here are all of the damage numbers I got when I was testing the Jade Rabbit in the Conflux Lost sector on Nessus. Now I'm not going to go over all of this information with you guys because it really just doesn't matter. All I need to say is aim for the head with the Jade Rabbit. Going for the Fate of All Fools is not worth it. You guys can see the damage right there. 1 body plus 1 crit is less than 2 crits, 2 body plus 1 crit is less than 3 crits, and so on and so forth. It's also worth mentioning that hitting headshots with the Jade Rabbit really is not very hard at all. It happens to have incredibly high stability, especially with the Catalyst, and it also has the Zen Moment perk, so once again, there is literally zero reason to aim for the body. Now I do see what Bungie was going for when they made the Fate of All Fools perk. They wanted it to be a little more forgiving if you ended up hitting a body shot and then a crit rather than hitting just 2 crits. But even then, it really just doesn't do very much damage in comparison to that at all. And then you have a weapon that, once again, is very easy to crit with. You're not really going to be missing that much with the Jade Rabbit anyways. In my opinion, what needs to happen to the Jade Rabbit is the Fate of All Fools perk needs to start dealing more damage inside of PvE, or Jade Rabbit actually does have an open perk slot. It only has 3 perks. You can give the gun Headseeker. I know Headseeker is a perk we really only ever see on pulse rifles, but it really just makes sense with the Jade Rabbit, and it would stack with Fate of All Fools very well. Those are just my favorite solutions for the Jade Rabbit's problem. If you have a different one, feel free to leave it in the comments below. But anyways, let's move on to the number 1 spot. Coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Hard Light. Now I know some of you guys may be a little bit confused by this, but the main reason I feel like the Hard Light needs a buff is the gun really just is not that useful at the moment. The only thing that Hard Light is actually really good at doing is breaking through elemental shields, which doesn't really matter unless the activity you're doing has the match game modifier, and even then you have 2 other teammates that you can coordinate with and cover those elements anyways. Now don't get me wrong, there was definitely a time where breaking through elemental shields was a lot more useful, but now that Bungie has sort of shifted their focus more so onto champions, Hard Light really just hasn't kept up. In my opinion, all Hard Light really needs to become a top tier auto rifle is just an anti-barrier mod. Think about it, the weapon can already break through all elemental shields, it really just makes sense. But once again, I will say, other than an anti-barrier mod, the Hard Light still is a pretty good auto rifle. Anti-barrier would just elevate the weapon a lot more. But anyways, that is pretty much all I have to say about the Hard Light, and that is pretty much going to wrap up this list of the top 5 exotic primaries that need a buff. If there are any other exotic primaries that you think need a buff that I did not cover in this video, please let me know in the comments below. But as always, I appreciate all of you guys watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, I would greatly appreciate it if you left a like and a comment letting me know what you thought. And if you really enjoyed this video and would like to see more from my channel, make sure you subscribe. Anyways, it's been Gravely. Peace.